What is up, YouTube? Having a key machine learning workflow is really important to any organization till now. Even though machine learning is very key in kind of decision making nowadays for any organization, it still feels like it's been left to only dedicated personnel with a heavy experience of machine learning and data science. This kind of thing is now changing. That game has been changing with with new products from Google, like Google BigQuery. They're trying to make things much simpler in terms of building machine learning models and your machine learning workflows using just as simple as SQL. And that's what we're going to do in this video. I'm going to guide you through how to kind of build one of your first machine learning models just using SQL. Before we move forward, if you're new to my channel, definitely hit the subscribe button. It really helps with the algorithm. Anyone who's new to machine learning concepts, this GIF kind of sums it up. You have this AI algorithm in place. First of all, you train this algorithm with this data of cats and dog, and once it's trained, at the end of the day, you can use this algorithm to do prediction on new images of cats, and as simple as that. One of the key things I wanted to cover is to understand what's the current machine learning workflow looks like and what are its problems. One of the key problems, it's very time intensive. What happens is usually there's a data scientist, specialized data scientist, which is involved. He first tries to get the data from somewhere, usually gets this data in like very small amounts, and then kind of import this data into an environment, which is usually like an IPython notebook, a Jupyter notebook, and then he uses this data and reads this data from libraries like pandas, and he gets his workflow from there. He reads the data, does some transformation from there. One of the important parts he needs to figure out is where this environment exists for him to execute all of this stuff. So usually it's being done on local in your own local laptop, or it's probably like some server where you kind of have a Jupyter lab in place. That's why it kind of gets complicated. You need some platform where you can execute this code, and then you need to build this data in like batches, because you're trying to read all this data in memory. The data is small. So yeah, if it kind of becomes cumbersome, and if you're not familiar with all these different technologies, Jupyter Notebook and different libraries within Python like Pandas, TensorFlow, etc., it's hard for you to get into building machine learning models directly as easily. And let's discuss an easier way to build machine learning models. Introducing Google's BigQuery. So BigQuery is like a data warehouse which resides in Google Cloud Platform for anyone to use. It's like a serverless, highly scalable, a multi-cloud data warehouse. It's kind of very powerful for you to use. The idea is you kind of dump all this data at a single place, build your warehouse where you have all this data for anyone to use. So once the data is in place, you can just use simple SQL queries to get the data, transform the data, because the query engine behind BigQuery is kind of really powerful. It allows you to query petabyte scale data. Like if you have like data in like huge chunks of terabytes and petabytes, it's very easy to just query them from BigQuery and just utilize simple SQL to get the data through. So once you have this data within BigQuery, they are kind of providing a service called BigQuery ML, which allows you to use simple SQL to create the models. So the key features for BigQuery is, like, as I mentioned, it's serverless. Its pricing model is not fixed, as if you're not just spinning up an instance and it's wasting money. It's kind of dynamic. As much as you query the data by millisecond, it kind of charges you for that. So it's not very expensive, at least at first when you're starting out. It gives you free credit, so it's not very hard to just get into. You can just create a Google Cloud account, hop into BigQuery and start querying simple public data sets, which is already there and available for you to use. There are other features I will not get into, but probably I'll leave it in the documentation. If you hop onto the the Google Cloud Platform console, you can just search for BigQuery as a product, and yeah, then it shows you the whole BigQuery console for just you to use. Let's look at a typical workflow of using BigQuery ML to build your machine learning models. In total, there are 5 steps in general, could be more maybe, but the first 2 steps are actually common to any machine learning problem or any data science problem. The first 2 steps is like getting the data. It's like extract, transform, load, getting the data into the warehouse, and the second step is to pre-process data, joining, merging, splitting, getting the data into the right format for anyone to use. So the next steps kind of changes here and makes things much easier, because this data is already at scale within BigQuery. The next 3 steps are very easy to do. So the third step would be to create the model. It is a simple SQL syntax: create model, the name of the model within the data set, give some options, which is like giving the type and a few things. A few more things you can do that as options, and then use the data which is already underlying as a select star and create the model. So after this step is done, the model is kind of already being trained into the BigQuery engine. The BigQuery engine is like super huge computing power which already exists for you to use. And then the next step is, once this model has been built, the next step is to evaluate. So there's one other function called ml.evaluate, and you pass in the name of the model, and kind of gives you the metrics around it. The last step is the prediction part, where the model has been built, you feed in the data and get the results from it. Moving on to the main part of the video, which is building a simple classification model using simple SQL syntax on BigQuery ML. Let's try to understand the first step, which is the data itself and the problem statement. The data is like a Google Analytics sample. The data looks like this. It contains like all these visitors coming to the website with the number of hits, the number of page clicks, etc. And it's most likely like an e-commerce website where people kind of come in, click on buttons, navigate their way through and buy products. So as a matter of fact, we have all this rich data from Google Analytics cookies, which has like the totals of visits, page views, and etc. Even the devices. I'll not get into details here, but that's the idea. So yeah, now we have this data. The problem we would want to solve is, when a person comes to a website the second time or like a few more times, will the person buy on return visit? So that's the prediction we would want to do from all this data. We got this rich data of people visiting the website. They visit once, twice, thrice, whatever number of times. We want to use features from this data set. The features will be the columns to predict if a person will buy on return visit. As a first step, let's try to explore the data which is already there for us to use. We've seen the schema. The next is, let's try to explore a few aspects of the data set. The first thing, let's try to check out the conversion rate. We have the distinct count of visitors, and then we can get a distinct count of these purchasers, and like let's divide these to get like total purchases of total visitors, and let's try to get a conversion rate. So yeah, as a result, the conversion rate is not very high. It's because the data set is not huge. I'm taking just the sample instead of the whole one. The conversion rate is like around 1.8%. So not very high, but still there is someone who's buying stuff at least. So yeah, as a next step, let's try to check out a few more metrics, which is what are the top 5 selling products. These are the top 5 selling products in our list. Google Leather Journals, Google Blackout Cap, Power Banks, something like that. And then you get all the total units sold and revenue for it. Next step, let's see how many, and as to the part of the problem statement, we want to see how many visitors bought on the subsequent website. Let's see a few key metrics here as well. Let me try to execute the query. So visitors who bought, like the idea is the visitor who bought on the return visit could have bought in the first place as well. So total number of who bought on the return visit was 31. Not that huge because the set is not that big. So that's the idea. The key exploration is not very comprehensive, but you can follow my lead here. You can check out the data set. You can check out the structure. Try to understand more of the data. Try to understand more of the features, and try to build a better model than me at least. All right. So now that we have explored the data set, the next step is one of the most important ones in building any machine learning model, is to select the features and create your training data set. So out of whatever you've seen, out of whatever you explored in the columns, you have to select the ones which you think and which you kind of work your way through, and they would be very useful to solve your machine learning problem. And in this case, would be, will the user buy on return visit or not? So the way we're going to do it, we're going to do a simple select query. In this query, I'm just trying to select just 2 variables for now, because I'm trying to build a very simple machine learning models. But the idea is you're going to work your way through and kind of do a bit more feature engineering, get more columns on board, and find the ones which are very useful. So in this one, I'm just taking 2 things. The bounces. The bounce would be if a person comes onto the site and just immediately bounces off. The second and would be the time on the site, the time they've spent on the site. These 2 key metrics I feel would be very important to see if the person will come back and buy it again. So the output of the query looks like this: a simple table with features and the output. So the features are bounces and the time on site, which we're considering for us to train the model, and the Y, which is the output, which will buy on the visit, will buy on return visit. That's the output, which will be, it will be 0 or 1. Based on this calculated field, like it checks transactions as greater than 0 and the new visits is null. That's how it just accommodates. And this builds us the training data set for us to train the model. And the next step is to create the model. The simple syntax looks like this. Place a create command, create or replace model. You define the data set. So I created a personal data set on my local project, as simple as that. Within that data set, I'm just naming it as a model, classification model. That's the name of the model I'm going to build. Within the options, I'm going to give the model type, which is the logistic regression model. Will, buy, on, return, visit would be the labels, which is like we just mentioned what the label is, what's the output is, and the rest of the columns would be treated as the input to the machine learning model, so it's not as very complicated. And within this placeholder, we're gonna just place the previous query because we already have the data table in place. I'm just gonna place the previous query which we saw in previous step, and that would be the feeder table for this model. And it makes things very simple. If you see, don't have to specify a lot of things. You just have to specify a label, the output. For a beginner, it would be very easy to understand and grasp. So let me just try to execute this function and see how it works. Let me click on run. Right, so the model has been built, the query has been completed. Took me 1 minute and 11 seconds. Some MB's process of ML engine. Basically, BigQuery charges based on this figure. It's not very high, like it shouldn't be very high for you to like pay right now because the free tier easily covers it. Just check it out, like how the figures look like. But the model kind of places here within your data set, and it's a very easy way to see things. You can click on the model and see all the details, all the training options, training, evaluation, etc. Similar to what we saw previously, then evaluation. And you can just use simple SQL queries to kind of get these as well. So let's just try to do that. So yeah, you can use a simple SQL query to evaluate a model. You just need to use the ML evaluate on the model you've just created. You can just put out a few cases and see like if the model is good, fair, or great, but by checking out the accuracy points. You can see all these details here as well when you click on the model. Just use simple SQL. So let me try to execute this query to get out all these details. The query has been completed. Gives the accuracy which is 52%. The quality is pretty poor, but the idea is you go about and play around with all these features, do the feature engineering, and improve the quality. But yeah, but the workflow will tend to remain the same. And yep, and that's mostly it. And there would be like one more prediction function I'm not going to include in the video, but yeah, I will leave the details in the documentation. Alright, that's it for this video. We're done with creating simple machine learning models using simple SQL. I covered most of the steps, even though the machine learning model was not super accurate yet, but the idea is you use feature engineering, play with the data, and kind of walk your way through. So yeah, that's most of it. If you gained value out of this video and my channel, definitely hit the subscribe button and like my video. It really helps with the algorithm to promote this video to people like you. Thank you so much, and thanks a lot for watching.